their B cells. So there's that there in almost every single person, and we don't even know what that does to us long term, other than maybe causing cancer.
Because everything does.
Yeah. At a certain point, it all causes cancer.
Right.
Old age causes cancer.
Can you put to bed the notion of this leaky gut syndrome stuff that's always making the rounds? That somehow people are vulnerable to microorganisms in their gut that are passing toxins or attacking them from within. Not heard of it?
No, I've heard of leaky gut, but I have not read up a lot about it.
So, I mean, I think what you're trying to touch on is just the notion of whenever there's a new field of science, there's also like a million pseudosciences that kind of crop up around it. And I don't know the exact specific one that you're talking about, unfortunately, but I do know that like there are people out there who are going to say that probiotics are going to cure everything, for example, or that, you know, you're going to get autism because only of the microbes. Maybe they play a role, but, you know, the science is far from certain that, you know, they certainly don't play the only role in it. And so there's a lot of misleading information out there about all of these different things. Like, if you take probiotics, it's not going to solve all of your problems. So, but unfortunately, I don't know the specific one that you're referencing.
Can you want to tell us more about it? So what happens? This idea your gut's leaky and bad microbes get in or something?
Yes, or that they're producing toxins. Certain microbes might actually puncture the gut or cause the more vulnerability to it. Kind of touches on a little bit of the Wakefield Lancet retraction that he had stated that somehow it caused more damage to the gut, which might cause more microbial damage to the neural to the developing brains and infants or
The only thing I know of that sort of touches upon that is you have something called bacterial load that builds up over your life, and that's just from years and years of having those bacteria there. It does end up weakening the junctions between cells, and you can get transferred from your gut to your brain is one thing that people are looking at, and that's, I know someone who's doing research, and their proposed hypothesis is that when that occurs, and that bacterial load builds up, that's why people who are older are more susceptible to strokes, because you're getting bacterial cells and things like that that are actually going to your brain and sort of clogging it up and making it not function as well, because your machinery is cleaning all that out at the same time as trying to deal with something like a stroke.
in that case, then chewing gum is probably more dangerous to your aging process than eating or pooping.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd eaten poop. That's probably a good thing to do.
So it's probably not good for your teeth. It's probably not good for even your teeth microbiome, which is actually very important.
Depends on the gum. There are some varieties that have no sugar and teeth cleaning properties.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, so regarding the Wakefield retraction, I actually read the entire paper. It was appallingly bad science.
If you want to hear more about it, come to the vaccine controversy panel tonight.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so basically, one of Wakefield's many very shady, very general hypotheses was that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine would increase the load of measles, mumps, and rubella in the gut, which would cause like the leaky kind of gut syndrome that Joe was kind of discussing, but Joe is discussing an actual valid scientific hypothesis that is being tested, that isn't being linked to autism. His theory was that basically you would have this cloggage issue with these vaccines that are pumping in inactivated and attenuated viruses, and that somehow this would affect the neural circuitry of the patient and the developing brain, and that would cause autism. However, numerous studies have proven that vaccines don't cause autism, because think about it, we're surrounded by viruses and bacteria right now. Like, you can't escape them, unless you're those mice that we made that were germ-free. Don't become germ-free, it's a bad idea. But if you think about it, there's a very logical reason why leaky gut syndrome can't be the case. because you're constantly being bombarded by viruses and bacteria, even when you eat, it goes into your gut, you're increasing the number of bacteria in there temporarily. And if that hypothesis were true, we would all have severe developmental disorders. And so simple logic dictates that like the leaky gut syndrome just doesn't hold up. And then the science also backs it up after proving like time and time and time and time again. Like there are like 30 years of research trying to disprove this and people still believe it. Guys, please don't not vaccinate on the basis of leaky gut syndrome, okay? What you eat is not giving you brain damage, all right?
Yeah, just a quick note to maybe clear something up real quick. With the bacterial load theory, it doesn't matter which bacteria it is, it's just all those bacteria building up over time. So you could have different percentages from a different person and it could lead to the same issue. It's not one kind of bacteria causing a problem, it's the massive amount of all of them.
Quick question, to go back to like fetal development and like during pregnancy, I was like learning in class about the difference between like live birth, like vaginal birth versus a C-section. Do you guys have any like, I just want to learn more about that, if you have any like commentaries, like I know there's a lack of the microbe transfer between the mother and child when they're doing the vaginal birth versus C-section, and we were learning that they're trying to do some kind of like, to give the children or like the newborn babies that same microbe that are born through C-section because it helps with like the whole lactation and.
I know a little bit. Do you guys know any specifics
I
though?
I've heard, so I know there's research going on now that's at least comparing, it's comparing the microbiome of C-section baby versus non-C-section baby, and then also looking at the potential of breastfeeding versus not breastfeeding, for example, and the transference of microorganisms from the baby physically, suckling on the mom's teat and taking her milk, right, and the kind of differences that might evolve there in terms of now what's going into that baby's gut and what's getting in there too. But beyond the fact that people are looking into it now, and they're actually about to open a huge microbiome center at ASU, and I believe they're going to be bringing in some studies specifically at the breast milk thing. Beyond knowing that that exists and that you can go look at it and find it and get that information, I don't know if they found anything definitive yet.
I think the problem with this field is we have like 10,000 interesting questions that are all like, we know these microbes are here, but we don't know what they're doing and we don't know what effect it has. So I think it's entirely plausible that it does have an effect. So I think we have to be careful about going too far and, again, thinking that just like, okay, if you don't have the right combination of microbes, then I'm going to get cancer and autism and all these other things. Like the science does not support that, but that they do have an important role is something that is entirely established and plausible at this point, but it's still going to take longer to really work out exactly what all of these different effects are.
Which brings up a good point about this field is really a field of big data, right? So we have these huge data sets. And we also have a huge amount of variance, right? If we want to get, for example, even in this study, when we're with the patients that have autism and the normal patients, there's so much variance even within a normal population of what's in your gut, depending on the last time you ate, or what you eat, or what you don't eat, or what you drink, right? So how do we even get a good background to compare that to? So right now, this field is still very young, and like I said, in 2008, when they started the Human Microbiome Project, they were, I think, kind of naive in thinking that in 5 years, they would be done, right? Here we are, and we've been doing it for 9 years, and we've barely even started. So if any of you are interested in maybe computer science or something like that, and don't see a way that you could possibly be in biology, oh my goodness, big data is big biology right now, and we really need you, we could really use the help, so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are used to thinking about science as having all the answers. Well, I think one of the reasons why this field is so fascinating and so interesting is a field where we have very little answers and just tons and tons and tons of questions. I think definitely in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start to learn a whole lot about what these microbes are doing and what influence they're having. And so that's why it's, I think, a very fascinating field to be in that needs new people in it working on these problems too. So if you're looking to get into science, it's a very fantastic field to get into.
Do you think within our lifetimes we'll have a, like, just microbe doctor where you need to get your microbes corrected or fixed or chemoed?
Well, there are currently people who purport themselves to be like microbe doctors. They usually are on websites that are independent blogs that suggest that you only eat kale for every meal. But I think that with more information and science and like with more info from like the Human Microbe Project, or Microbiome Project, I could definitely perceive that the information taught in like the education of doctors could significantly change when we discover the larger role that microbes could play. And so I don't know if necessarily, I mean, there could be a specialty for everything, but I think that like the mainstream practice of medicine it already understands at great length like the effect of microbes on like disease and stuff like that. And I don't know if I could really think of just only having a doctor for microbes. But I mean, it's a good thought to think about.
They're already using stool transplants to cure C. diff.
They talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, we did. we probably talked about it more today.
Yeah, but at the same time, out of the millions of things that can go wrong with your gut, the idea of the fecal transplant, to getting poop in your butt, yeah, which is actually a real thing, somebody else's. Yeah, the only thing that it has been shown to treat is this one very specific colonization by a bad microbe, and you essentially put the poop in, and it gets microbes that will displace the C. difficile that are causing this problem. Similarly, probiotics, you can find people who will try to sell you probiotics for everything, and yet there's only maybe 2 or 3 things that probiotics have actually been shown to actually help with, mostly just diarrheal diseases. Like if you're on antibiotics and you take probiotics, you might get less diarrhea while you're on those antibiotics. So we're at this point where we have all of this information, and the actual science on it is very much in progress, and we're learning more every year, but there are people out there who are going to try to tell you that we can solve all your problems with this stuff, and you have to be careful separating the actual science from the pseudoscience in these cases.
Yeah, it turns out if you follow the advice of people who say like probiotics can cure everything, it turns out you might actually get diarrhea, so who would have thought?
And so it is kind of the Wild West right now in terms of what do we do with all that information and how can you get it. So there are companies out there already that it's kind of like, 23andMe is this company where you give them a swab of spit and then they'll look at SNPs in your chromosomes, or 23 chromosome pairs. That's basically what they do. And so there are companies that are similar to that where you can send them the poop samples and they'll charge you, and it's the same thing that you can get here, at the ASU lab. A company will do that. So there are already companies that are supplying that service to people because people are so curious. But at this point, it's even as the scientists that do all the research and have all the facts, or whatever facts there are yet in the field, we still can't even give you anything definitive yet. I think a more interesting question, though, is even if we do discover that scientifically, will that mean anything legally? Will that mean anything in terms of the insurance system and how that works, and whether or not we can even use that information? And then when we do have that information, when you think about the same things we thought about when we were starting the Human Genome Project, which people are thinking about now, it's how then do you interact with insurance companies that might want to discriminate against certain people based on either genetic predispositions in the case of the Human Genome Project, or now genetic predispositions due to the microorganisms that are associated with their bodies, right? So can we say someone shouldn't get insurance or should be charged more because they have a higher propensity for C. diff or something like that? I don't know. So these are the kind of interesting questions that we should be asking and pondering as well.
I have a question. Yeah. I'm not actually a doctor. So if we just say an average person lives 80 years, just for numbers, how many different generations of gut bacteria would they go through?
A lot. I mean, some microbes are really good at living for a very long time. I mean, yesterday, Andy was talking about these microbes that they found in ice after 100,000 years that were still alive after thawing. Meanwhile, you have these bacteria that rapidly multiply and could go through like 1 million generations in like a week. Over time.
Fun fact, some bacteria replicate so fast. So if you were able to just give E. coli, standard old E. coli, infinite resources and just let them just go nuts, just eat everything. So after about 1 week, the ball of E. coli would be expanding outward at the speed of light and it would encompass the entire known universe. So some bacteria replicate really, really fast.
So on on that, if you're talking about the colonies that are sort of there for whatever amount of time and are sticking with you, you might have colonies that from birth are there until you die. So, but we
and
honestly
it's
don't
highly
know.
variable. It's very based on what you eat. It can change based on what you're intaking. It can change based on what diseases you get. It can change even based on like, you know, like maybe if you're getting like more exercise. All these variables can affect your microbiome, and we're only just starting to understand that.
It's very interesting. So there was a term that was going around a few years ago, but I haven't heard it as much recently, but it's enterotype. And it's basically typing, like you would have a blood type, you have a microbiome type. And so they were looking at certain connections between certain kinds of diets around the world and seeing, hey, do we have a type for this part of the world, or this part of the world, this part of the world. As of now, I know that they have basically the Western microbiome, right, and the Eastern microbiome, and it has a lot to do with the intake of proteins, right? So if you ingest a lot of proteins, you're going to end up generating a lot of acids. So you're going to select for more acidophiles or bacteria that like acidic conditions, as opposed to eating more starches and rices. You're going to select for different kinds of microorganisms that are capable of fermenting